Millionaire spends all time with his mistress, but his pregnant wife's next move leaves him frozen. A swirl of diamonds and betrayal sparkles in the heart of Manhattan beyond the golden doors of the Plaza Hotel, where whispered rumors hint of a marriage on the verge of ruin. Alexander Harrington, a millionaire whose name once evoked admiration in every corner of high society, has a secret that's more than an open secret. He spends night after night with his captivating mistress. Meanwhile, his pregnant wife, Elena, waits alone in their grand penthouse, her heart silently shattering. But little does Alexander know, Elena has a plan that will leave him frozen and force the entire city to question how they define loyalty, love, and power. Alexander Harrington was no stranger to success. As one of the most influential venture capitalists in New York, he had grown his empire by recognizing opportunity where others saw only risk. From technology startups in Silicon Valley to sprawling real estate in Manhattan, his portfolio was so large and diverse that few kept track of its true magnitude. Yet no matter how rich or powerful he became, Alexander thrived on more than money. He craved control, glamour, and the admiration of everyone around him. His life sparkled with extravagance and notoriety. House staff at his luxurious Upper East Side mansion whispered about his elaborate parties, rumored to rival those of Gatsby himself. Elena Harrington, his wife, once attended these parties by his side, a beautiful partner who seemed destined to share in the shine of his success. But as the years slipped by and Alexander's affections waned, she found herself standing in the shadows while he soaked up the limelight. He met Elena when they were both studying at Columbia University. Back then, Alexander was ambitious but not wealthy. Elena was brilliant, charitable, and came from modest means. A scholarship student, she worked part-time at a local library, while Alexander, already on the verge of entrepreneurial stardom, had a small campus-based investment club that would later bloom into a multi-million-dollar venture. Their love story began in the library's reading room, sparked by a shared love of business journals and debates about the future of technology. In those early days, Alexander's eyes burned with a genuine admiration for Elena's drive, independence, and sharp intelligence. They bonded over late-night coffee runs and study sessions in dim corners of the campus, where he would whisper ambitious dreams into her ear. He spoke of conquering Wall Street, building an empire, and someday living in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Elena's eyes would twinkle with excitement, but she also urged him never to lose sight of what truly mattered: family, kindness, and integrity. But as the years rolled on, Alexander's dreams came true faster than either of them expected. The small investment club became a major player in angel funding for tech startups. Soon, corporate giants sought him out, wanting to be part of his next big venture. He spent countless hours in meeting after meeting, forging relationships with top executives worldwide. Elena watched this meteoric rise with pride, supporting him every step of the way until she realized his attention was shifting elsewhere. When Elena became pregnant, Alexander's attitude toward her started to feel cold. At first, she thought it was due to his busy schedule. The man was always on his phone, traveling from one conference to another. Yet, it wasn't just business that tore him away. Whispers grew louder. Alexander was in the company of a mysterious woman seen entering his chauffeured limousine late at night, departing from his lavish office on Fifth Avenue. Elena tried to dismiss the rumors as idle gossip. She recalled the promises they had made to each other, the nights they had stayed up planning for a family, and she clung to hope. But Alexander's behavior left little room for denial. Once affectionate, he became indifferent to her needs, ignoring her calls and messages with mechanical excuses like, "An important meeting just came up," or "Investors are in town, I can't possibly leave." In the midst of her pregnancy, Elena found herself alone in a mansion teeming with luxury but empty of warmth. She was attended by housekeepers, private chefs, and personal assistants, but the person whose presence she truly desired was nowhere to be found. When she heard the name Camilla Gray floating among the staff, she finally saw the shape of her greatest fear. Camilla was rumored to be a strikingly beautiful socialite with a family pedigree that boasted connections all over the city. If gossip was to be believed, Camilla had set her sights on Alexander's wealth and influence, and Alexander, in his unrelenting lust for novelty, was only too happy to offer everything he had. From that point on, Elena's life became a charade of heartbreak hidden behind forced smiles. Each day she felt more isolated in a house that sparkled with chandeliers but lacked the warmth of genuine love. She would pass by the portrait of her and Alexander taken on their wedding day, the same day he vowed to cherish her forever, and wonder how that promise could fade so easily in the bright lights of Manhattan's social swirl. Yet Elena was not a woman to be crushed by despair. Though the pain weighed heavily on her every night, she channeled her heartbreak into a silent resolve. She had grown up watching her single mother work tirelessly to provide her with a good education. She had seen adversity and come out stronger for it. Elena knew she might not match Alexander in terms of raw power or financial muscle, but she had her own strengths, intelligence, empathy, and an unyielding sense of what was right. In that spirit, she resolved to learn everything she could about her husband's investments, business dealings, and personal connections. She possessed a keen analytical mind and was well versed in finance, thanks to her time at Columbia and her early role supporting Alexander's budding empire. Quietly, she began to gather documents, scanning them late at night. She combed through investor statements, corporate filings, and real estate holdings, building a map of every corner of Alexander's vast network. She was, in essence, preparing for war, because a voice inside her said, "If you want to be respected, you have to stand your ground." Alexander's affair with Camilla was not subtle. He took her to five-star restaurants like 11 Madison Park and Le Bernardin, where they dined in private rooms. Paparazzi often caught glimpses of them stepping out of limousines, he in a tailored Tom Ford suit, and she in glimmering designer gowns. The tabloids speculated about the tension at home, but it was only a matter of time before everything burst into the open. For Alexander, this affair was a game, a pursuit of excitement. He convinced himself that Elena understood his needs, or at least would look the other way as long as he provided for her. He believed his money could buy silence, acceptance, and unconditional loyalty. Camilla, on the other hand, was enthralled by Alexander's unstoppable confidence. She was a fixture in the highest social circles, but her own family's fortune had dwindled. Linking her fate with a man as wealthy and influential as Alexander Harrington was a strategic move. It gave her a chance to maintain the lifestyle she had always craved. Late-night rendezvous became a staple of Alexander's schedule. Meanwhile, Elena was left flipping through television channels, her mind filled with worry for her unborn child. Nights in the massive bed felt colder than she ever imagined. Her once vibrant soul felt battered by heartbreak, yet a quiet determination began simmering beneath her sorrow. Some nights she would dream about the early years, when Alexander's love felt genuine. She remembered how he used to hold her in his arms, whispering about the future they would build together, a future bright with possibilities. But the memory of his presence had become like a ghost that haunted the halls of their mansion. And each time Camilla's name slipped from the staff's lips, Elena felt her heartbreak turn to something sharper, more resolved. One evening, as Elena picked at her dinner of filet mignon and salad, the butler handed her a letter. It bore the insignia of an attorney's office located in downtown Manhattan. She felt an immediate dread. Could Alexander be so brazen as to threaten divorce already, even though she was pregnant with his child? But as she opened the letter, she realized it wasn't from Alexander's personal lawyer. It was from a firm representing a new real estate development in which Harrington Enterprises was heavily invested. The letter requested her signature on certain partnership documents, courtesy of Elena's stake in the business, an arrangement set up years ago when Alexander had used part of her name for tax and portfolio diversification. In simpler terms, if Elena signed these forms, she would be quietly granting Alexander the right to proceed with a massive development deal without her further input. A flicker of realization dawned. For years, Alexander had passively included her in his business documents, partially because they were married and partially for tax advantages. But now he was making moves that could push her aside. It was all so clean, hidden behind glossy paper and legal jargon. She sensed Camilla's influence. Perhaps the mistress was urging Alexander to keep the big deals in his own name, away from the eyes of his wife. Or maybe Alexander simply wanted Elena out of the picture so he could continue living as though she didn't exist. Elena's first instinct was anger and hurt, but a more strategic thought took root. This was a sign that Alexander was shifting things around. If she signed, she would be left with no say in one of his biggest ventures. She decided to keep the letter, not as a piece of heartbreak, but as a clue. That night, as she prepared for bed, Elena mentally replayed every moment from their marriage, searching for the points where she'd compromised too much, where she allowed Alexander to overshadow her. She remembered how he had once praised her genius in analyzing market trends, how he used to call her the brain behind the empire. Over time, as his empire grew and his ego swelled, she had been relegated to a decorative role, someone to smile for holiday photos and cut ribbons at philanthropic events. But she was no doll to be put on a shelf. The next morning, Elena made phone calls to accountants, to old friends in the legal field, to mentors from her Columbia days. Using the knowledge and resources at her disposal, she began carefully charting out potential ways to safeguard her and her child's future. She wasn't sure exactly how she would execute her plan, but she knew that having a strategy was essential. In a quiet corner of the Upper East Side, Elena had lunch with her closest confidant, Patricia. They chose a small Italian restaurant called Caravaggio, renowned for its handmade pasta and hushed atmosphere. Patricia was an old friend from their university years, a woman who had become a reputable attorney. Patricia listened in stunned silence as Elena revealed the depth of Alexander's betrayal and the plight she found herself in. "He's grown too bold," Elena said, stirring her cappuccino absent-mindedly. "He's out in public with her like I don't exist. He's ignoring that I'm pregnant with his child. And now he's trying to ensure I have no leverage in his biggest business deal yet. Why, Patricia? Why would he be so callous?" Patricia took Elena's hand gently. Men like Alexander thrive on power. Once they taste it, it changes them. But you, Elena, you're no pushover. Remember how brilliant you were in our business law seminars. I believe you can turn this situation around. Elena nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, but she held them back. She was tired of crying. "I won't let him ruin our child's future just because he wants to flaunt a new woman on his arm. But I need to be strategic. If I lash out publicly, he'll spin the story to make me look unstable, or worse. If I keep silent, he'll continue to treat me as disposable." In the dim glow of that restaurant, with the aroma of fresh pasta wafting by, Elena and Patricia devised the beginnings of a plan. First, Elena needed to gather every piece of evidence that demonstrated Alexander's infidelity: receipts, photos, any relevant communications, not necessarily for a public scandal, but in case legal action was needed. Second, Patricia would discreetly search for any prenuptial agreements that might surface, because if Alexander had prepared a legal safety net, Elena had a right to know. Third, they discussed the real estate deal. Patricia would help Elena comb through the paperwork to see if she could legally challenge the new development deal that Alexander was trying to wrest from her control. Leaving the restaurant, Elena felt an empowering sense of purpose. She was no longer the naive wife at home, waiting by the window for her husband to return. She was a woman ready to protect herself and the baby growing inside her, and with each step she took on the sidewalk, she could practically feel the city's hum of energy fueling her determination. While Elena strategized in secrecy, Camilla Gray basked in the glow of Alexander's attention. Their nights glittered with champagne toasts at the Waldorf Astoria, whispered conversations in penthouse suites, and private flights to weekend getaways in the Hamptons. Camilla flaunted their relationship on social media, posting pictures of expensive gifts, a diamond necklace from Cartier, a limited edition Birkin bag from Hermes. Although she never tagged Alexander directly, she left enough clues to make her circle of friends buzz with envy. Alexander was bewitched by her beauty and the thrill of secrecy, though it wasn't so secret anymore. Their love affair might have been frowned upon in certain conservative circles, but New York's elite thrived on scandal. Paparazzi staked out outside five-star restaurants, capturing Camilla's radiant smiles and Alexander's smug expressions as they slipped into his black SUV, the tinted windows shielding them from too many prying eyes. Camilla saw Elena as nothing more than a stepping stone, a woman who had outlived her purpose in Alexander's life. She viewed Alexander's child as an unfortunate complication, not a blessing. Whenever Alexander felt the need to check in at home, Camilla would feign a pout, complaining that Elena was draining his time and energy. She masterfully manipulated him, positioning herself as his only source of genuine excitement and solace. Whenever Alexander expressed fleeting guilt, Camilla would remind him of his own ambition and independence. "You're the master of your destiny," she whispered in his ear. "Don't let anyone hold you back, not even your wife." Alexander found this flattery impossible to resist. His empire had indeed grown beyond measure, and he was too far into his spiral of arrogance to question whether he was becoming a monster. The more Camilla adored him, the less he cared for Elena's well-being. On a particularly indulgent night, as Camilla and Alexander lounged in a rooftop jacuzzi overlooking the sparkling skyline, Camilla casually brought up a sensitive topic. "Have you considered making our arrangement official?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by official?" "Divorce her," Camilla said, swishing the champagne in her glass. "You're practically never home anyway, and everyone knows we're together. Why not end it and be free?" A tense pause hung in the air. Alexander's mind flickered briefly to Elena, to the memory of how they started out with such hopeful dreams, to the unborn child he was legally and morally bound to. But Camilla's sultry eyes pulled him back to the present moment. "I have to be careful," he replied. "Elena has certain shares, certain stakes in the company that complicate matters. If I rush this, it could cause a ripple effect with the investors." Camilla leaned closer. "I trust you'll handle it," she whispered, her lips brushing against his ear. "And once the dust settles, we can live as we please without all these secrets." Alexander nodded, feeling the intoxicating blend of power and lust. His future with Camilla seemed worth any risk, or so he believed in that moment. Back in the Harrington mansion, Elena felt the baby's first kicks. She placed her hands over her belly and felt tears of a different kind, tears of fierce love for the little life forming inside her. No matter how bleak the situation with Alexander might be, her child gave her a sense of hope and clarity. She would not let heartbreak define her. Instead, she would focus on protecting herself and her child. Patricia's investigation yielded valuable results. For one, it appeared that Alexander had a prenuptial agreement in place, drafted shortly after their engagement. But Elena had never signed it. Back then, Alexander had told her it was just a formality recommended by his advisors. She had refused to sign, feeling it undermined their commitment. Oddly, Alexander never pursued it further. Given that the document remained unsigned, it was not legally binding. Additionally, Patricia discovered that the real estate deal Alexander was trying to close relied heavily on Elena's name. Because of a tax arrangement they'd set up, Elena effectively owned half of the shares in the new development. If she withheld her signature, the deal would be stalled or even fall apart entirely. This gave Elena a powerful bargaining chip. Elena also found a key ally in one of Alexander's senior financial advisors, a man named Bernard Allen, who respected Elena from the early days when she was helping with business research. Bernard, having grown uneasy with Alexander's shameless flaunting of his affair, secretly provided Elena with information about upcoming mergers, acquisitions, and expansions planned under Harrington Enterprises. He did so under the table, risking his position, because he believed Elena deserved to know what her husband was scheming. Elena, Bernard confided over a discreet phone call, you should be aware that Alexander has been moving assets around. He's trying to minimize what you'll be entitled to if a divorce hits. But there's only so much he can do because of the way you two have structured ownership over the years. He needs your cooperation on a few big deals to keep everything afloat. That night, Elena stared at the spreadsheets and documents scattered around her. She realized she had an unexpected advantage. Alexander was not untouchable. He needed her more than he might ever admit, at least in terms of the technical and legal framework that underpinned his empire. And in the corporate world, finances spoke louder than words. If she played her cards right, she could bring him to his knees, or at least force him to see that she was not someone to be cast aside. Despite her deepening resolve, Elena still harbored a small flicker of hope that Alexander might come to his senses. One evening, after hearing from the butler that Alexander was expected to come home for an important meeting in his private study, Elena decided to face him. She wanted to confront him about the affair, the baby, and their future. She also hoped, despite everything, that maybe he would apologize or show remorse. She waited in the ornate living room, dressed in a simple but elegant dress that accentuated her pregnant form. Hours passed before she finally heard the front doors swing open. Alexander, talking loudly on his phone, strode into the mansion, ignoring her as he headed straight for his study. Elena followed him, her heart pounding. When she entered his study, he glanced at her dismissively. "Elena, can this wait? I'm in the middle of an important negotiation." "No, it can't," she said, summoning courage. "We need to talk," Alexander sighed, ending his phone call. He turned toward her with an expression that was somewhere between annoyance and mild curiosity. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I know about Camilla. I've known for a while." A fleeting spark of guilt crossed his face, only to be replaced by icy detachment. "What do you want me to say?" "It's complicated." Elena felt her voice tremble. "Complicated? You're out with her every night. The tabloids have a field day. You have a pregnant wife at home, and you're parading around with a mistress. That's not complicated. It's humiliating." Alexander's voice turned cold. "Don't raise your voice. This is my house, and you do well to remember who pays the bills here." The remark stung, but Elena stood her ground. "I can't believe the man I fell in love with has turned into this. I'm carrying your child, and you don't even pretend to care." Alexander glanced at her belly with an impassive stare. "I provide you with everything you need: money, comfort, healthcare. What more do you want?" "I want a husband who respects me, who understands that our child isn't just a transaction," she said, her eyes welling up. "If you can't be that man, then at least have the decency to let me move on." Alexander scoffed. "Move on? You're not going anywhere. You think you can just leave and live off my money? You'd be nothing without the Harrington name. Remember that." Elena clenched her fists, her anger rising. "Don't underestimate me. You have no idea what I'm capable of." A sneer appeared on Alexander's lips. "Do you really want to threaten me, Elena? Fine. But don't forget, I built this empire. You just tagged along." The words struck like a dagger in her heart, but they also fueled her determination. She realized then there was no salvaging the man he'd once been. That man was gone. This person before her was a shell consumed by arrogance. He had no intention of mending their marriage or even treating her with kindness during her pregnancy. She mustered what composure she had left. "Someday soon you'll regret this," she said quietly. "I promise." With that, she left his study, tears streaming down her face. But beneath the anguish, a new kind of strength was blossoming. She recognized she had to protect her child and her future by any means necessary. In the weeks that followed, Elena's plan came together piece by piece. She refused to sign the real estate documents Alexander had sent her and, through Patricia, conveyed that she would not budge unless they sat down for a fair negotiation of her terms. This infuriated Alexander. He bombarded her phone with angry messages demanding that she cooperate. She didn't respond. Instead, she told him to communicate through her attorney. Meanwhile, Elena took inventory of everything in her name or partially in her name. She leveraged the knowledge that certain properties, shares, and accounts were legally hers, even if Alexander had set them up primarily for tax breaks. If he forced a divorce, she could potentially walk away with a significant portion of his empire. Yet, her desire was not revenge for revenge's sake. She wanted him to realize that she was not just an accessory, but a partner one who could destroy everything if pushed too far. Alexander, cornered by business deadlines and investor pressure, fumed at the new status quo. The real estate deal was a cornerstone of his future expansions, and without Elena's signature, it was locked up in endless red tape. Camilla prodded him constantly, whining that Elena was trying to sabotage them, urging him to do something drastic. One day, Elena received a call from Bernard Allen, sounding more anxious than ever. "Elena, something big is happening," he said. "Alexander is planning an emergency board meeting to realign assets. He's trying to push you out completely. If this meeting goes through, he might claim you're mentally unfit due to stress from the pregnancy, or that you've been making irrational decisions to sabotage the company." The news jolted Elena. She realized Alexander was escalating his efforts. If he declared her unfit, he could potentially remove her from all decision-making roles. That meant her best shot at preserving any influence was to act before this emergency board meeting could materialize. Under Patricia's guidance, Elena moved swiftly. She called for her own meeting with Harrington Enterprises board members, citing her right as a major shareholder. She also prepared a presentation of her own, which included detailed charts and documents showing how integral her investments were to the company's success. With Bernard's help, she gathered evidence of Alexander's lavish spending on Camilla funds that were sometimes drawn from corporate accounts in questionable ways. Though it was risky, this evidence could be used as leverage to prove Alexander was mismanaging assets. On the day of the meeting, Elena arrived at the Harrington Enterprises headquarters wearing a simple but elegant black dress. Her pregnancy was now quite visible, underscoring both her vulnerability and her determination. Board members, some of whom had known her since the days she used to help Alexander, looked at her with curiosity and concern. When Alexander arrived with Camilla in tow, an audacious move that turned heads, Elena kept her cool. Camilla sauntered to a corner seat, her eyes sizing up Elena like a predator. Alexander took his place at the head of the table, ignoring Elena's presence at first. But as the meeting began, Elena laid out her case methodically: the financial ties, the questionable expenditures, and the legal ramifications of ignoring her stakes in the company. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked to Alexander for clarification, but he offered only a smug grin. "What are you trying to accomplish, Elena?" She met his gaze firmly. "I want transparency. I want the respect I'm owed for my share of this company. I want you to understand that I will not sit quietly while you funnel money into your personal indulgences." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "You dare question me in front of my board? Do you even understand the damage you're doing to our public image?" Elena responded calmly, though her heart hammered in her chest. "Our public image is already tarnished by your scandalous behavior. It's time you took responsibility for your actions. You might think I'm powerless, but I'm done letting you walk all over me." Silence gripped the room. Finally, one of the senior board members coughed nervously. "Mr. Harrington, Miss S. Harrington does hold a significant share. We can't proceed with certain expansions without her agreement. Perhaps it would be prudent to work out a settlement or arrangement." Alexander clenched his fists, glaring at Elena. "You want a settlement. You'll get whatever's reasonable in a divorce. But don't think you can blackmail me into giving you more than you deserve." Without missing a beat, Elena produced copies of financial documents showing extravagant gifts, vacation expenses, and other high-ticket items, all billed to Harrington Enterprises. She placed them on the table for all to see. The board members whispered among themselves, alarmed. Even Camilla's face drained of color as she realized how explicit the evidence was. Elena's voice was steady, but each word cut like a blade. "If a divorce is the path you choose, so be it. But I have no intention of walking away empty-handed, especially when you're mismanaging corporate funds for your personal pleasures. The authorities and the press would be very interested in these records." Tension crackled in the air. Alexander's face twisted in rage, and Camilla looked ready to bolt from her seat. The board members, fearful of scandal, stared at Alexander, waiting for his response. After several agonizing seconds, he let out a long, shaking breath. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Elena calmly replied, "We will negotiate a fair distribution of assets. I will have a say in all real estate deals that require my signature. Until that agreement is finalized, you will not try to remove me or vilify me to the board. And if you dare try to cut me out or paint me as mentally unfit, I will release these documents to the press. Are we clear?" Alexander gave a stiff nod, his eyes flashing with resentment. "Crystal." Word of the showdown at Harrington Enterprises spread through the city's elite circles like wildfire. Rumors circulated about how the previously demure Elena Harrington had stood up to her husband in front of his entire board. Some admired her courage, while others whispered that she had humiliated Alexander beyond repair. Those closest to the Harrington Empire watched nervously, unsure whether Alexander's downfall was imminent or if he would find a way to strike back. Camilla, however, refused to accept this turn of events. She lashed out at Alexander in private, accusing him of letting Elena walk all over him. "She's ruining everything," Camilla hissed. "Why don't you just take her to court and crush her legally? You have enough money to do it." Alexander, still reeling from the public humiliation at the board meeting, snapped back. "You think it's that simple? She has proof that could cripple my reputation. Investors would flee if they caught wind of misappropriated funds. And if the tabloids get hold of it, our stock prices would plummet, not to mention the regulators." Camilla scowled. "So, what? You're just going to let her ruin our future?" Alexander stared at her with a smoldering mix of anger and confusion. "Our future? Right now, I'm not sure about anything. This entire fiasco has put my empire at risk." "Maybe you don't understand the gravity of that." In the following days, Alexander spent hours with his lawyers trying to draft a new agreement that would appease Elena enough to keep her silent. Meanwhile, Elena continued to gather support, not only from Patricia and Bernard, but also from some sympathetic board members who believed Alexander had gone too far. Still, she knew the fight was not over. Alexander was a wounded lion, and wounded lions were most dangerous. As Elena advanced in her pregnancy, she found refuge in small joys, like feeling the baby's movements and strolling through Central Park on crisp mornings. Each step she took among the towering trees and serene ponds gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She imagined a future where she could provide a stable, loving environment for her child, independent of Alexander's whims. She knew she had to be strong. Alexander's attempts to broker peace were half-hearted at best. In truth, his lawyers mostly offered deals that favored him, though less transparently. But Elena and Patricia refused to sign anything that undermined her rights or her child's inheritance. Tensions escalated to a boiling point. Then came an unexpected twist. Camilla began pressuring Alexander to marry her, implying she wouldn't wait forever. Her dream of becoming Mistress. Harrington was the primary reason she tolerated Alexander's anger and the drama surrounding Elena. But as Elena continued to hold her ground, Camilla felt her golden ticket slipping away. In a moment of desperation, she threatened to expose Alexander's darkest secrets if he didn't finalize his divorce and make a commitment to her. Alexander was caught in a vice. On one side, Elena had enough evidence to trigger legal investigations and tarnish his name. On the other, Camilla threatened to release her own trove of private pictures, videos, and personal communications that could destroy any remnants of Alexander's credibility. The man who once held all the power now found himself trapped by the very women he tried to control. His health began to show signs of strained dark circles under his eyes, an anxious twitch in his left hand, and a newfound habit of snapping at employees for minor mistakes. In board meetings, he appeared distracted. Investors whispered that maybe the Harrington empire was not as stable as it once seemed. The crisis peaked when one of Alexander's biggest clients, a global tech conglomerate, started pulling out of potential deals, citing lack of confidence in Harrington Enterprises management. Meanwhile, Elena received an unexpected phone call from an old friend named Dylan Martin, who now worked as a journalist for a major financial publication. Dylan had heard rumblings about Alexander's questionable financial activities and wanted Elena's perspective. For a fleeting moment, she considered giving him an explosive expose. But she hesitated, remembering that such a move could not be undone. It might sabotage not only Alexander, but also everyone depending on the company. And it could bring unwanted stress to her unborn child. She chose caution, telling Dylan only that she appreciated his concern but had no comment to make. As her due date approached, Elena focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. She painted the nursery walls a soft lavender, filled the drawers with tiny clothes, and carefully arranged a crib, gifted by one of her closest relatives. Amid the chaos of her ongoing battle with Alexander, these small tasks brought her grounding and hope. On a rainy afternoon, Elena felt a sharp pang in her belly. Initially, she brushed it off as a normal pregnancy ache, but when the pain intensified, she called her driver and rushed to the hospital. Patricia and Bernard hurried to her side, waiting anxiously in the corridor as doctors examined her. Stress had taken a toll on her body, and she was experiencing early labor symptoms. Fearing complications, the doctor prescribed bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Reluctantly, Elena returned to the mansion, confining herself to bed rest while under the watchful eye of a private nurse. During this vulnerable time, Alexander made no effort to contact her. Instead, she occasionally heard from staff that he was away in London on a business trip, likely accompanied by Camilla. If the rumors were true, yet The wheels Elena had set in motion continued to turn. Patricia and Bernard ensured that the board was kept informed of Elena's status and that no major decisions could be made without her input. Slowly, the tide began to shift. Some investors started questioning Alexander's leadership, while others reached out to Elena directly, asking for reassurance that the company would remain stable. In an act of desperation, Alexander returned from London with Camilla in tow. He planned a secret meeting with certain influential board members to force a resolution. During the closed-door session, he proposed that Elena's shares be bought out, effectively removing her from Harrington Enterprises. He was willing to offer a large sum enough to tempt anyone who valued a quiet life over corporate warfare. But what Alexander failed to realize was that a sizable faction within the company had grown tired of his scandals and erratic decisions. They saw Elena as a balancing force. They believed that with her intellect and moral compass, she might actually be better suited to lead or at least to serve as a critical check on Alexander's excesses. When Elena caught wind of this meeting, thanks to Bernard's tip, she acted swiftly. Although she was on bed rest, she instructed Patricia to represent her interests. Patricia arrived at the meeting and presented a stark alternative. Either Alexander stepped down from day-to-day operations, allowing an interim CEO to stabilize the company, or Elena would expose the entire fiasco to the public, including Camilla's role in questionable financial affairs. The board members were stunned. Whispers filled the room. Alexander turned red with fury, and Camilla looked like she wanted to vanish. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then the board's chairman, a seasoned businessman named Robert Chang, broke the silence. "We cannot let personal matters sink this company," he said firmly, looking directly at Alexander. "Nor can we ignore the evidence that has been brought forth. Mr. Harrington, your mismanagement has put us all at risk." Alexander's eyes flitted around the table, seeking allies, but found only guarded expressions. Camilla placed a hand on his shoulder, but even she seemed uncertain. Slowly, Alexander sank into his chair, realizing the power he once wielded with impunity was gone. That night, Elena was awakened by incessant ringing. It was Alexander. For the first time in months, he was calling her directly. Surprised, she picked up, her heart pounding. "What is it?" she asked, her voice thick with fatigue, his voice cracked with desperation. "Elena, I'm at the hospital. It's my father. He had a heart attack." Despite everything Alexander had done, Elena felt a jolt of concern. His father had always been kind to her, a man who once told Alexander to treasure Elena's love because genuine affection was rarer than gold. "I'm sorry. Is he okay?" Alexander paused. "He's stable, but the doctors say it's critical. They asked if you could come. He keeps asking for you." Elena's chest tightened with conflicting emotions. After all the betrayal, her heart still felt compassion. "I'm on bed rest, Alexander. I'll need special clearance from my doctor, but I'll come if I can." She hung up the phone, tears brimming in her eyes. She recalled how Alexander's father always treated her like a daughter, encouraging her to stand up for herself. This moment reminded her that life was fragile and that personal grievances sometimes paled in comparison to matters of life and death. Her doctor approved a short hospital visit, provided she stayed calm. The next day, she arrived in a wheelchair, guided by a nurse, to see Alexander's father. He was hooked up to machines, looking frail. When he saw her, he mustered a weak smile. "Elena, thank you for coming, child." She gently took his hand. "Of course. How are you feeling?" "Tired. But I'll be all right." He gazed at her belly with watery eyes. "That grandchild is my hope. You must take care, both of you." Alexander stood nearby, silent, his eyes downcast. For a brief moment, they locked eyes. In that weary gaze, Elena glimpsed the Alexander she once knew, a man capable of tenderness and regret. She wondered if it was genuine or merely a fleeting emotion overshadowed by everything he had done. Outside the hospital room, Alexander approached her. "I'm sorry about everything," he said softly, his voice hoarse. "I never meant for it to go this far. Camilla, the money, the deals. I just got lost." Elena studied his face, searching for sincerity. She spoke quietly. "Alexander, there's a line you crossed. You humiliated me, ignored our child, and tried to strip away everything I built with you. I can't just forget." He hung his head. "I know, but for what it's worth, I'm sorry." She took a deep, trembling breath. "Apologies don't fix what's broken. If you truly mean it, then step back. Let me have the space and respect I deserve. And be prepared for a future that might not include us being together." He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. "I understand." Following his father's health scare, Alexander's perspective seemed to shift, at least temporarily. He distanced himself from Camilla, who, in response, began searching for a new benefactor among the elite circles. Whether out of guilt or genuine remorse, Alexander quietly agreed to sign an arrangement that allowed Elena substantial control over certain company divisions. He also consented to an interim CEO who would manage the day-to-day operations until the legal matters were settled. Overnight, the city's gossip columns were filled with news of Camilla's abrupt disappearance from the Harrington narrative. She cancelled events, stopped posting on social media, and was rumored to be traveling overseas. Elena didn't care. Her focus was on her impending motherhood. She felt a wave of relief, knowing the storm was finally calming, even if she could still see the remnants of damage everywhere. With Elena's new role, Harrington Enterprises started stabilizing. Investors took comfort in her more prudent approach. She froze unnecessary expenditures and insisted on internal audits. She also set a date for renegotiating the real estate deal. This time, it would be on terms she deemed ethical and beneficial to the company, not just a personal cash cow for Alexander. Meanwhile, Alexander struggled to come to terms with his new reality. He watched from the sidelines as the empire he once controlled with an iron fist was now in the hands of the wife he had so callously discarded. Irony bit hard, and karma was merciless. For the first time in his life, Alexander experienced powerlessness. He realized the bedrock he thought would always be under his feet had crumbled, largely by his own doing. The final weeks of Elena's pregnancy were marked by a sense of cautious optimism. She continued her bed rest, delegating tasks to trusted associates. On a late winter's evening, she felt the contractions begin in earnest. Rushed to the hospital, she endured an arduous labor, but at the end of it, she held a beautiful baby girl in her arms. Tears of joy streamed down Elena's face as she cradled her newborn. She named her Aurora, a symbol of new beginnings and fresh hope after a long, dark night. Patricia, Bernard, and even a few board members sent flowers and gifts, celebrating this precious addition to the Harrington family. Alexander arrived at the hospital the next morning. Standing by the door to Elena's room, he peered at Aurora with a stunned expression. For a moment, he just gazed silently at the miracle in her arms. Elena looked up, her emotions swirling. She wasn't sure how to feel about Alexander's presence. "May I hold her?" he asked, his voice trembling. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Carefully, he took Aurora in his arms, tears slipping down his cheeks. "She's so perfect," he whispered. Elena watched him, remembering all the pain he had caused. Still, a piece of her heart softened at the sight of him cradling their child with such tenderness. "She deserves a father who loves her," Elena said, her tone gentle but firm. "Can you be that man?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with remorse. "I want to try, if you'll let me." Elena let the moment hang. She finally spoke, exhaustion thick in her voice. "One step at a time, Alexander. In the weeks that followed Aurora's birth, Elena found herself busier than ever managing her new role in the company, adjusting to motherhood and treading carefully around Alexander's attempts to make amends. True to her word, she did not simply forgive and forget. Her guard remained up, especially concerning Aurora's well-being. Yet Alexander showed small signs of transformation. He spent more evenings visiting Aurora and even changed a few diapers, something Elena never imagined he would do. The legal negotiations took on a more harmonious tone, partially due to Alexander's calmer demeanor. He agreed to a separation that allowed Elena sole custody with clearly defined visitation rights. He also consented to child support payments without a fight, fully aware that contesting it would only create more damage. As for Harrington Enterprises, the arrangement remained that an interim CEO ran day-to-day operations, while Elena and Alexander each held significant shares. It was an unconventional setup, but it provided the stability investors demanded. Camilla Gray, for her part, became yesterday's news. Rumor had it she had fled to Europe, searching for her next wealthy conquest. Neither Elena nor Alexander bothered to track her down. She had become an unpleasant chapter in their story, a living reminder of how close Alexander came to destroying everything. Life, however, rarely ties up neatly. Elena understood that challenges still lay ahead, from co-parenting with a man she no longer trusted completely to maneuvering the complicated corporate politics. But she had proven to herself and the world that she was not a passive victim of Alexander's whims. Her intellect, resilience, and unwavering love for her child had carried her through the storm. At the Harrington mansion, no longer the lonely fortress it once was, Elena held Aurora by a window, looking out at the city lights. She whispered, "We made it, sweetheart. We're free to write our own destiny now." The baby cooed, and Elena smiled. It wasn't the life she had once dreamed of, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long while, that was more than enough. In the aftermath of high-stakes betrayals and shocking twists, Elena emerged as a force nobody saw coming, least of all her millionaire husband. What began as heartbreak transformed into a strategic triumph that allowed her to hold her head high, protect her newborn daughter, and safeguard the future she had worked so hard to build. Though Alexander now lives with regret, he must face the cold truth. Unchecked ambition and infidelity come at a cost no amount of money can repay. Elena found her voice and used it to demand the respect she and every person deserves. If you found yourself captivated by Elena's story of resilience, heartbreak, and victory, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more riveting tales. Each view, like, share, and subscription helps us continue to bring you gripping stories about life, love, and the transformative power of never giving up. Thank you for being part of this journey.